Okay. Well, welcome everyone to this Saturday morning edition of our spring tulips inside a work boot. um, so my name is Anita Thompson. I know most of you, but for those that are new, welcome. I own Art Venture Workshops. I'm a mobile-based art business and I teach mostly for libraries. But I also am now expanding into recreation centers, and I do corporate events now. So yeah, there's some expansion going on behind the scenes. I will keep you guys posted. But I'm so happy to see everyone this morning. So we need our paper and our pencil. We're going to be drawing lightly. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. If you need me to slow down, you can also put that in the chat. I'm going to hold up the picture one more time in case anybody would like to take the picture to work off of it as we're going. Oh, you're so sweet, Marcia. You guys will be the first to know if I ever become famous. I don't think I'll become famous. Oh, I know I won't. I'm an introvert, so I, I like my little world just as it is, but some expansion is fun. But thank you. Okay, so getting started here, we are going to start with the boot. And I'm going to just come a little bit closer here so that you can see this. So as you can see, it's a pretty big drawing. And it's actually pretty in depth as far as the sketching. I'm just going to show that up close. That is mostly pencil. So we only use our tortillon just a little bit to kind of smudge some things. And then we go over everything with pencil marks. So I think this will be a really fun one. Yep, I'm going to shut that light off because I think we have enough light. If anybody needs more light, let me know. And I can light it up a bit, but I feel like we're good. All right, so starting with our boot. Let me just get this a little more. There we go. I had to center it a little better. We're going to start off going down our page, and we're going to be going about halfway down. You want to make sure that you leave room at the top for your tulips. So we're going to go about a little more than halfway down, and we're going to come about right here. So we also want to make sure that we get the boot in the entire page. So we're going to start off with a very basic shape of our boot shape. And I'm going to go a little bit darker so that you can see my pencil lines here. So we're starting off with the top part of the boot. And we're imagining what the boot would look like without the tulips in it for right now. So we're thinking of it as a three-dimensional object, right? So this is the top of the boot. So we're just creating a very basic shape of a cylinder for the top opening of the boot. And now we're going to create the very basic shape of the boot itself. So because the boot is angled and it's coming towards us, it's going to be foreshortened, something called foreshortening. You may be familiar with that term. It basically looks smaller as we're drawing it. Well, it doesn't look smaller. We draw it kind of smaller in order to give the illusion that it's coming towards us. So coming here at the heel, we're going to curve it, and then we're going to go towards ourselves, or towards us, towards ourselves. That's a pretty interesting thing I just said. And then we're going to go towards the left and curving, and then straightening out just a little bit. My boot is getting a little bit too much, too big here. So I'm going to dial it back. So what happens with foreshortening is that it actually looks more like it's coming out than it actually is. And we're just doing the general shape. Oh, just let Kathy in at first. So what we're doing is the shape, and then we're going to get into the details. This is the area for the tongue. So you're going to see that it's very kind of scratchy right now in the sense of the basic shapes. Welcome, Kathy. We are just getting started with our drawing on 8.5 by 11 paper here. And I'm just going to recopy the information in the chat. Sorry for my arm, everybody. As I just copy this information for Kathy. Okay. All right. So we've got our basic shape happening here, and then we're going to start adding in some more of the details. So right up here at our boot, we're going to thin out the side here of the curve. And we're going to start adding some wrinkles into our boot. So we've got the first wrinkle happening. And that wrinkle goes down towards the heel, but not at the heel. It's kind of coming from the leg area and then just expanding out a little bit. That's our first wrinkle. We have a smaller wrinkle right underneath that, like so. So it looks kind of like a bump. And again, you're going to soften up these lines later on, but I want to make sure that they are in there right now. We haven't done the sole of the shoe, so we'll add that on as well. We just want to get more of the general or more of a specific shape of the boot at first. So we're coming back to the heel now. It's kind of pointy over here. And then it turns. And as you see, there's a little bit of a bump here. And then it goes flat again. And we want to add the curve for the points of the toe area. So again, we've come here and we're just kind of retracing and making sure that we have that shape. And you can erase any lines that don't make sense along the way. And then we're going to leave that spot there for now and go back over to the left side of the boot here. And we're going to come up to the top here where the tongue is. I kind of roughly drew in a tongue. And I'm going to erase inside the tongue so that it's now just a rectangle. But I want to reshape that rectangle. Before I do that, though, we want to deal with the shape up here of the side where the laces are going to enter in. So we're talking about this space right here. And that line is going to bend a bit toward us, curve downward towards the heel, like so. And then we're going to come back up over here to create the other side of it. Now, as you can see, there's some bumps along the way. And then it kind of flattens out into one bump right here. Like so. And give everyone a chance to catch up a bit. Make sure no one else is coming in. Okay. Okay, and again, erase any lines that are kind of in your way here. I'm going to make this just a little bit thicker or wider. Now, once we do that, we want to draw the cylinders for the inserts of the, oh, rain is coming on, for the laces. So we're going to start here at the top. And for now, we're just going to draw them as ovals and circles. Hi, Lorraine. Just copy that in the chat. Good morning, Lorraine. We've started drawing, but we are, hello. I'm just putting the information in the chat for you, and this is being recorded. Okay. So coming over here, we're going to create those cylinders or circles for the entrances of those laces. You're welcome, Lorraine. Absolutely. I didn't even know that function was possible for other people, for recording from someone else. That's pretty cool. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, when Lorraine joined, I had a message that popped up that said ask, she was asking if she could record it, just by the device said that. And I said yes. So I guess if anybody's interested in recording this, you can also send that message. I'm not really sure how you do that, though. That's interesting. I'll have to learn about that. Pretty cool. Either way, I will send it to all of you. So once we have our circles down, you just want them generally there, and we'll deal with those later, but we want to get those in. We're going to now go back over to the tongue. So we mentioned we're going to be reconstructing the rectangle here to make it look three-dimensional. So what we do is we're going to create a smaller side rectangle for the top or the side of the tongue. And then the top part. And the tongue at the bottom actually kind of turns a bit. And I'm going to go closer. So what I'm talking about is at the bottom here, it turns a bit. Let me erase the other lines around it so that doesn't confuse you. So it's going to look a little something like this. And then we're going to work into the middle of the boot here. Okay, so going into the middle of the boot, we're going to go to the bottom for a second of this section, and we're going to create our first wrinkle down here. So it's not going to go completely over to the right side because we're going to make sure that that side is also going to be probably a little bit expanded. So I'm going to lightly erase the line on the right side of the shoe in the section that we're working on. And we're going to deal with the laces. So the first lace here, we're going to skip for now. We're going to start with this lace. So inside that circle, you need to kind of draw a sort of half circle on the side. And again, I'm going to go up really close so that you can see. So here's the half circle. And then you're going to start to draw the top of the lace, and it's going to bend over to the right side. And for now, we'll just sort of be doing the shape of the lace, and then we can go back and make some more of the specific bumps in the lace. So there's our first side here. And then we're going to come back over here to the boot. And we're just going to create a line on the right side that goes into our shading right there. So the line I'm talking about is here coming from the tongue. And actually, this goes up a little higher. Sorry about that. I was looking at another line. It's going to go up on the side of the tongue. And it's going to go down and just curve very slightly towards the boot. So again, this line is just coming down and then it's going to curve slightly towards the boot, but we're going to leave it right there for now because we may have to adjust this part. So now we're going to get back to the laces. We have a portion here that is actually part of a lace, but it's going to turn and be like this, and you can kind of fill that in for right now. So that part I just did. We're going to stay here on the right side, and we're going to add the next lace that is underneath the boot. So it's not going towards the opening of the lace, and it goes over the other one. And then you have to make the ending of it here. So for instance, it's going to be shaped a bit like this. And you see how that ending is wrapping itself toward the side of the tongue. So we're going to keep going now. And we're now going to go on top inside this lace. And you're going to create again a half circle on the left side. Now you're going to be drawing the line on top of the lace. And you're going to be going towards the right side of the boot. And then you're going to draw the second part of that lace. And again, going towards the second side or right side. And then you're going to erase inside the lace so that it now looks like the lace is on top. We're going to be bending this lace a little bit over here. But before we do that, we now want to come over here where you should have like a little bit of a line, and we want to make a little bit of shading right here, like so. And then underneath that shading, we're going to start to create the rest of the boot. So we're going to start to make some bumps. We have a bump right here. And then that's going to go straight out again towards the curve of the toe. So remember, we haven't made the bottom of the shoe yet. We just want to get this part pretty well done. So again, erase any lines that are not needed. And then we're going to go back up to the laces. So we're now going to go over to the final circular part where the laces enter, and you're going to make your half circle on the left there, and you're going to make your lace coming from it, but this one's going underneath the other lace. So start off with the top line, You're going to curve it, and then you're actually going to bend it downward. So right here, here is that lace. And then you're going to come back and finish off the second part and bend it so that now the lace is going behind the shoe or in the insert in the other area. And then we're going to draw that other area. Everyone doing okay so far? I know the laces can be confusing. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to fix this area right here, the flap of the shoe, and just bring that up a little bit. We're going to make it a little wider. And then it's going to curve back down. But there's another part of the shoe that's coming out of here. So didn't want to confuse you first with that. So let's readjust this by making it swing out a little bit and then back down. And then there's a little bit of a line right here. And now around where this lace is, you're going to make the other portion of the part of the shoe. And it goes out and then down. Actually, a little closer here to the shoe. Out and down, and then you're going to make it three-dimensional by adding another side. Let me get that darker for you. And now we're going to come back down to the bottom of the boot before we start any of the rest of it inside here. We're going to come back down here and we're going to draw the rest of the heel and all of that. So we're coming back down here. This is going to curve downward. And then go inward back towards the boot. And we're going to draw sort of this general shape. And then we'll get to the details. So again, we're going here, we're going to curve a bit. And then start to level out in the front. And then curve back around here where it meets the toe. Let me fix my lines here. Okay, so we're going to come back now over to the bottom, and we're going to start adding some of the details. So for instance, we're going to go to the very bottom here and add sort of the cleat parts. So on the outside here. So first cleat's going to go inward a little bit. It's kind of like, they almost look like bricks. Sort of like the outline of bricks almost. That's kind of how I think of them. And then they get a little smaller as we get towards the front of the shoe, but curves again when we get to the corner here. And then we're going to also go in between the shoe and the bottom of the shoe toward the heel. And we're going to make another section here. And then as we go around, we're going to make another line going in between where the shoe meets and the bottom. And that's the sort of the outward line for the shoe. And we'll be going back there and adding more shading. So we're still going to stay on this left side of the shoe here as we get into some of those crinkles. So we're now going to add some parts on the shoe so that we know that we're going to be shading. So we're going to start here underneath the crinkle, and we're going to make the first part of the shoe that we're going to be shading a little bit. So I want you to kind of go around like so. And then as you get toward the toe, you're curling just a little bit. You're going to go back up over here where the laces are. And we're going to just darken up a little bit of this area for the shading. Go across and make a little bit of a bump right here. I'm going to erase inside so you can see that properly. So again, we started off over here. We flatten out a little bit, go up a little bit, and then into the bump. Into our next bump here. And I'm just flattening this out just a little bit. And then we're going to go across the shoe now and just start to add in some really light curves. And we're going to go back and make those obviously more detailed. So we're just kind of adding some bumps and some lines before our shading. And then we're finally going to start doing the last, or start drawing the last two laces here. So we're going to come back up into that first hole here, and we're going to make the curve for the lace. And then we're going to start bringing the lace down from that opening It's going to go over the shoe and downward to the ground. And then it's going to kind of curve back out. And flip over. And then it's going to flip back up. So follow that around until you get back up to the original hole. And then you can erase inside the lace so that it's now flowing over the shoe or in front of the shoe. And then you can readjust the shape of the lace. And it's turned a little bit here. And then you have a portion of the lace on the other side here coming out, sort of a triangular shape with the end of the lace sticking out here. And now we're going to start shading our shoe before we get into the tulips. All right, so we're going to come back here over to the left here, and we're going to start up top in this section. We're going to make this part of the shoe a little bit flatter, the line. So we're now going to start to kind of clean up our lines. We're going to come around this side, and we're going to shade a little bit in this corner because we're going to start adding, the tulips are going to be kind of overflowing from this section, but we shade a little bit here for now. And then we're going to shade on the outside at the top here, going towards the lace. But we need to add one more final component to this section. And that is this part starts to bend and go inward towards the top of the boot. So again, here, I left this blank, and then it turns so that it's three-dimensional. And then we make another line for the side of this area. And as you can see, it's sort of almost like a dotted line. It's not a solid line. So we're now just creating that line on the shoe design. And now it looks even more like a shoe. So we have some shading now on this part of the shoe. We're going to shade now on the left side of that area that we just did, in between each of the holes here. I have to make mine just a little bit thicker here, a little bit wider. Here we go. Starting to run into the laces. We're also going to shade inside each of the laces or the holes and the surrounding portion, making those lines just a little bit darker now. Darkening up the curve here of this portion of the shoe. In this section here, kind of just remodeling it a little bit to make it a little bit wider. If you need to do the same, now's your time to do it. And then we're going to start shading in between the laces. So we're dealing now with this center part before we start to get upward and downward. We're going to do in the middle here and above the first lace. We're going to shade a bit medium dark. And then underneath it, shading a little lighter than that from left to right. So we're shading in between the laces right now. And as we get downward, we get a little lighter. So we're just shading from left to right for now. So you're probably thinking, well, now you kind of can't see the laces. Well, now we're going to go back and we're going to make the lines for the laces a little darker. A little more pronounced. We're going to come back up to the top and really make darker along the side in between the laces going down the shoe. And we're going to carry that shading over onto the outside of the shoe and on the left side. So I'm talking about this part here. And a bit of the curve there. And let's not forget this little portion here that is becoming the other part of the lace here. So we had this part shaded, and now we're going to add a bit of a curved line to it. We're going to go into the tongue for now, and on the left side, make those lines darker, as well as the top curve. And we're going to make it a little darker here with some bumps. So see what I did here? I went here on the left and I made these lines a little darker. I made it a little darker up top in this part and the curve here. Then I'm going to go into the middle part and make a light curve there and here. And then I'm going to shade up and down at the bottom. So I'm just going to show that up close just so you can see. So see, my pencil direction is going up and down. So we're really getting into the variety of our pencil marks, which is pretty cool. I don't know that we've done too much of this yet with for those of you that have taken my courses. You have to let me know if you like this kind of drawing. And I can add more of these in the fall too. Anyway, for our purposes right now, we're then going to come over here to this portion of the shoe, and we're going to make another line that still is going to go back into the curve of the shoe here at the top. And then you're going to shade that. And we're also going to shade the line along the shoe here. We're going to shade a bit darker over here. And we're also going to come down towards our lace that's kind of hanging out right here. And we're going to lightly shade that, but a little bit darker on the flipped side of it. So right here. Now we're going to actually flip on over to the left side of the shoe. So we're going to leave this alone for now. We're going to come back over here. We're going to start back underneath the shoe here, and we're going to darken up the line here. Make that a little bit thicker. And then there is some dark shading underneath. And as we're going into the first curve here, the wrinkle, you're going to shade lightly and then get really light towards the opening of the laces, or I should say kind of the meeting of that first lace. And then you're going to go back and you're going to make some lines like this. We're going to go to the second wrinkle here, or actually this one underneath. And we're just going to make some light lines for shading, like so. I'm going to start to go in closer so you can see. Here are the light lines. We're then going to trace a little more of the outside line of the shoe right here. We're going to do the same in this part. And this whole section is going to get to be a little bit darker with our shading. So shading in this section. We're going to continue that shading. We're going lighter at first, and then we're going to go back and go a little darker. We're going to shade kind of around this area, this whole section of the bottom of the shoe. So we're going to go light first. So again, shading up and down, following the shape of the shoe. And if you're noticing, my lines are going outside a little bit of the part that I'm shading. And that's a good thing. When we get to about right here, we're going to thin out our shading at the top And then just come back down with some line work, like so. Now we're going to grab our tortillon and we're going to do a quick shading. Like I mentioned, the tortillon, your cotton swab, or whatever you're using, we're not relying too heavily on it. But we're going to come over here and we're now just going to smooth out very quickly what we just did. And then we're going to shade on top of that. You're going to stop at the point at the tip of the boot, though. All right. We're going to use that a little bit too up in the leaves for the tulips, but now we're going to come back and we're going to shade a little darker on top of what we just did. And your shading can be nice and loose. So what I mean by that is that your edges, or the edge that you sort of created the space in which you're shading, your shading can kind of go over it, over the border of it. So again, I'm going to go over it again. And then I'm sort of making some individual lines for shading at the same time. So I'm shading a little bit and then I'm picking up my pencil and adding some strokes, individual strokes with my pencil. And then as we get to the bottom of the boot here, shading very lightly. But then we want to darken up the line in between the boot and the line for the boot shoe, or or I should say the line in between, like this line here. We're going to darken those up. Oops, I'm getting a little off there with my line. Let me fix that. You're going to darken that line up. And then when you come over to the left, you're going to darken up the one portion of it. And also add some of those lines going up and down. And this is right before you get to the lace here. And then going into the rest of that portion, you're going to make lines going around in that little section, especially towards the tip of the boot and as it gets toward the end here. So I'm just going to show that up close. See, that's what I'm talking about right there. We want to add some shading now to the back of the boot here. I'm going to make the back of my boot a little bit thicker here. I got a little bit thin with my heel. So we're going to add a bit of a shaded line and then shade a little bit around it. And then we're going to keep that shading and go into the rest of the boot and the cleat area. We're going to do some light shading. And then we're going to go in with our eraser a little bit, because we then want to create a dark line separating the end of the shoe area to the cleat area. I had to kind of add in my line again because I started to sort of shade and erase it. So I'm kind of redrawing my cleats here. And then you're going to shade into your cleats. And make them a little bit darker. But then you're going to go back into the cleats and you're going to make some details. So for instance, this cleat, this one separating this one, there's a shadow, right? It's a little bit darker in between so that that looks three-dimensional. You're going to do the same thing with some of these other ones, making darker shading in between each of the cleats. We're going to come back on the shoe here. And we're going to start adding some more detail shading in this area. And by that, I mean going into the shaded area and then pulling out kind of a curve. Like so. Going around sort of the edge here of the shoe. And then coming back and just making those sections a little bit darker. So then going back and shading a little more darker. In those sections specifically. We're going to come back up to the center of the laces for now. And the parts that we already shaded in between the laces, you just want to add some line work going up and down on top of your shading. And we're going to continue that line work into the top of the shoe and along the right side, right before this first bump. And then you're going to start to add some kind of light scribbling for some of the bumps in the shoe. And same on the left side. So as you can see, I'm doing a combination of going up and down and then adding some straight lines on top of it, like so. And now it looks like a little more of a worn boot. And then we're finally going to come over to this lace right here. We're going to make it a little darker on the underside. So retracing it. till it gets to the point that it's turning, and you're going to keep going. And then coming down here, just curving this a bit, doing some shading on top, a little bit underneath. And as we come back to the other side here, some very light shading on this side. I think I have to do some erasing here because I can still see. There we go. And then as it goes up the lace on this side, we have a kind of a little darker spot here of shading. And again, we want to outline on that side. Do some really light line work here in the white area of the boot. And then we're finally going to do the detail here for the inside of each of the areas of the where the laces are coming out of. So just a little bit of some shading right in around each of those, and then also just a little bit on each lace as it comes out of its little sections here. So you just want to do a little bit of shading on each of those. And let's see what else. We got that, okay. And then we're finally getting up into our tulips. So I'm going to expand my thing here. Our last part is now the tulip area. And we're going to start over here on our left. So let me get this in view. A bit more. And we're going to start again our very basic shaping here. We're going to start on the left here at the bottom, and we're going to just have some of the drooping parts of some of the greenery. And then we're going to start with the first leaf right here of the shape. So coming here, so we're starting in the background here, this leaf here, we're going to extend it outward to the left. Here's the basic shape for that. And again, we're going to be adding things in front of it. So there's our first leaf. We're going to come back down here toward the shoe. And we're going to add a leaf or a stem kind of coming out this way. So again, everything should be kind of light right now because then you're going to erase inside there in order to make that in front of it. We're then going to add our tulip here, and it's going to come from about right here. So we're going to add the stem for the tulip. It's going to curve and go upward towards this leaf, and it's going to stop about right here. And then you want to double that line. We're going to make the shape of the tulip up here. So we're starting off at the bottom part of the tulip here. And then inside, we're going to make some very basic shapes. On top here. There's our first tulip. So we're not worried about shading anything yet. We're going to start, or we're going to add in our second leaf here. And it's going to be in front of this tulip. So we're going to start about right here. And we're going to curve that upward. Like so. And then we're going to add the next shape of a leaf. And we're not going to finish it. We're not going to make it go down here yet. And then in the meantime, you're going to erase at the bottom of your greenery. So you're erasing the part of the shoe that you drew originally, but now it's going to be kind of clear so that we can add the greenery on. And then we're going to make the middle tulip coming from right behind this leaf. So our stem is here. And this is one of our higher tulips. So here's our stem. And I gotta make this a little bit smaller. There we go. We're gonna make the shape going up towards our paper. So again, basic shapes here, kind of a teardrop shape in the center. And then we get into shapes with sort of pointy at the ends. Inside. And we're going to start on our last tulip here. So our last tulip here is going to be right around this, in front of this leaf right here. So we're going to start it at the bottom here and curve it outwards. You're going to make the second line as well. And you can erase everything for now in order to make the stem. And then you're going to make, again, the shape of the tulip. Pointy at the top. And then our teardrop shape in the middle. And then pointy areas coming out of it. And same with the background. We're finally going to start adding the greenery. I'm going to sharpen my pencil a bit. It's getting pretty dull. You may want to do the same. Okay, and now we're going to start adding some of the greenery in front of it and complete our shading. So we're going to come back over here to the left. We're going to start adding some greenery coming out of the shoe again. So coming back down over here, we've got some darker greenery. Expanding to the left. You're going to shade down here a little darker so that it now looks like the inside of the shoe. You're going to come over here where we left this, and you're going to make another piece of greenery from here. So it's going to curve around towards this tulip. And then the other side is a little bit lighter. Let's make that a little darker here on the left side. And you're going to shade that. I'm going to go in closer now. So here's that one. You're then going to shade the stem of the tulip. So the top part is a little darker, and I'm going to shade going from left to right on the side. And then as it goes downward into this leaf, it gets a little darker again. And then we're going to shade this leaf. So this leaf, we can then make the curved line down towards the shoe. And we're going to start making some curved lines going now towards the pointed part of the leaf. And you're going to shade the tip So now you're going with the side of your pencil, and we're now shading on top of that leaf. You can clean up the points if you've shaded over top of it. And you want to make your lines a little darker going towards the tongue. So you're shading a little bit darker there. Now you're going to still stay here at the bottom to the left here, because you're going to start filling in some lighter little parts of greenery. So right here, there's one. You have another one that's a little darker coming from right behind that. So we're now filling in this space, getting a little lighter shading here, kind of in a clump, because we're now going to be sort of shading the next large leaf. So see, I started shading towards this area, and I'm now shading the rest of that bigger leaf. I'm going to do the detail of it, remembering that we still have another greenery piece here. And you can kind of quickly shade darker on top of that. And then continue with your shading on the leaf behind it. And it gets darker over here. So now you have a combination of darker and a little bit lighter, but then you go back up into the point of the leaf and you make it darker and outline the other side. So we're getting there. We are almost done. I know we're like 5 minutes over. We're going to go another 5 minutes over if everyone's okay with that. If not, this is being recorded, but we're almost finished. So we're going to come over now to the top of the tulip over here. We're going to outline it a little darker here. We're going to add some side shading to the one part. There's a lot of kind of side shading and, you know, shading up and down and in different directions. Again, this is a very loose drawing. So the separations of the flower, that's where your shading would be. And then getting inside the tulip, you're going to define each of those areas. So here's one area. Shading a little bit here because it's kind of sticking out of the flower. Here's another petal. And you've got your first tulip here. You can add some scratchy lines to it here and there. But we're going to get into the stem of the second tulip. And you're going to outline it. And again, side going from left to right, shading at the top of the tulip stem here and in the bottom. A little darker. And then you're going to get into the actual flower. Again, doing a little outlining, and you're basically going to be shading at the bottom of each of these petals on the outside. And then when you go inside, it's kind of almost like you're shading one petal. And then adding a bit of dark areas and lines to each one. And then our final tulip here, you're going to go into the stem and again, go a little darker at the top, a little lighter at the bottom. Same thing with the tulip part. We shade at the bottom of each one, each petal of the ones in the front. We do a combination of shading in one spot and then creating some shading by alternating our lines. I'm gonna go close for this. Getting to the back, kind of shading it all almost as if it's one unit, but then going back and adding some darker lines to it on top of those, and also redefining the general shape by making it a little darker. And then our final part is just going to be adding some stray kind of foliage behind, and it's sort of shaded. So basically going behind your tulip and adding lightly shaded leaves that are thin, branching out from the bottom of the shoe or inside of the shoe. And then also adding some sprigs, darker sprigs that are sticking out. On the side. And adding kind of one more taller blended leaf here. And your drawing is going to probably be pretty gray on the white part of it. So you can clean that up later and, cleaning all of it up afterward. But I am so curious to see what everyone's looks like. So I'm going to stop this recording.